don't remember to do these things, then I never will. And then, is there anyone on the meeting that can put in the link to donations? If not, I can pull that up after my presentation.
I can do that for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Austin. If this is your first presentation to attend, although these are free CEUs, we are collecting donations for our student funds. So all money donated will go towards some of our student practicum funds and other student-centered projects. So please feel free to add to that as you would like. So I don't know a lot of you looking at all the names, so let me do a brief introduction of myself. So I'm Jennifer Dell, and I work on the Norman campus. I'm the undergraduate coordinator here in Norman, and I have worked at the university. I think this is my, fourth or fifth year. I think I lost count which year, but it's one of those two. And prior to coming here, I worked for 15 years for the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. And I worked 10 of those years in direct care, and then 5 of those doing more macro community-based activities. But the 10 years that I worked in direct care, I worked with primarily youth, and then also their guardians, their parents. And with that, I got to do a lot of motivational interviewing, because MI is something that is a very common practice used with individuals that have substance use or substance misuse disorders. So when I got to come back to OU and I had the opportunity to teach this class and to also teach it with Dr. Wells, who taught me some of these things when I was in graduate school, it's been kind of full circle. And teaching that class right now, it's a spring class, and this is one of my favorite classes to teach. If you're in my online substance use elective, a lot of this will look very familiar, because I think this content is important to add on to from motivational interviewing. So some of this content you're also receiving in the class in a few weeks. So you're getting a teaser. This is your promo of that future lecture. Dr. Wells, anything you wanted to add? I saw you unmuted. No? Okay. Well, then without further ado, let's get started. Let me just see like a show of hands. Who has, or you can use your emoji since not everyone's camera's on, who feels like they have a basic knowledge of what motivational interviewing is? Okay, good. So this is verifying kind of what I thought, that we have some motivational interviewing informants today. So we won't spend too much time, like I said, going into the basics of it. So I'm going to share my slides. So I've called this motivational interviewing and the stages of change. My slide show up. My mouse doesn't want to cooperate. So first, I want to share that there's a lot of the information. Many of you have had the Miller Enrollment text that you've purchased, Helping People Change, which is a wonderful reference book. But much of the information in this PowerPoint actually comes from Tip 35. And you can download that. I'll drop a link in the chat, but you can download that from the interweb. And you can also request a free copy that SAMHSA will send you. It usually takes several weeks, so don't expect it, Amazon Prime delivery, but you can get one delivered to your doorstep. So I reference it all the time. I pull up the Tip 35 to teach my class, but I also have a hard copy that I requested a couple years ago, and it comes in very, very handy. I'm also in the process of reading Miller and Moyer's new book, which is called Effective Psychotherapists. So some of that information also informs these slides. And if you use an MI, if you're interested in MI, or if you just want to continue to learn how to fully embrace these approaches, then I would highly recommend reading that book. It's a fun read. Right, so as we all know, motivational interviewing is a collaborative conversation style for strengthening a person's own commitment to motivation and change. And in the context of this presentation, when we're talking about using MI with individuals with substance use disorders, that's so important because individuals enter substance use treatment, or any kind of treatment need on a whole continuum. And so the framework of this presentation is how we can use the stages of change to really best give that individual the care they need. One of the things that I appreciate about motivational interviewing is just that it also aligns so well with our perspective as social workers, as it values individuals' autonomy and really helps to have that partnership. And as we all know, partnership, collaboration, autonomy, and evoking change are all essential components to that spirit. So as this progresses, think about the spirit and how you personalize that in the work that you do or the work that you plan to do. And through that, think in your own mind, what does it mean to be an effective listener? And feel free to drop some things in the chat if you think of some things that come to mind immediately on what makes someone an effective listener. How do you express compassion, and how can you effectively do that? And then what makes that easy to express? It's important to kind of check ourselves and know our own biases, and when do we need to make sure that we're able to present ourselves in a way that is professional and embodying the MI spirit. So do we have biases thinking about use with substances, thinking about where maybe some of our own thoughts and feelings about those came from, maybe our families of origin or our own experiences that we've had with friends, family, other associations have had an impact on that. And then other signs in the exchange of when we're working in an individual micro setting. What do we pick up on that lets us know that someone is kind of picking up what we're putting down? How are we making sure that collaboration is real and authentic, and we're able to put our best selves forward? And being really intentional. In my classes that I teach, that's one of the things we have to work really, really hard on, is just showing up to a space intentional and not thinking about what am I going to say next, and preparing yourself for being scripted, because that's MI as well as social work. There's this huge amount of improv to the work that we do, and that you can't pre-plan conversations. So with MI, we get to embrace this shift in perspective where we focus on a client's strengths. We get to be individualized and client-centered, really have the spotlight on the importance of this partnership, and then get to use empathy and not authority and power. When I first started my first job, there was still some of this, some of the training that I received was still very much in how do you work with resistance, and the words that we used around individuals that had substance use disorders or that didn't want to come to treatment. A lot of the words we used were non-compliant and resistant, and really there was this value judgment with that those in maybe more of the helping roles. I didn't realize it then, but looking back, I realize now that we were not really looking at some of the individuals that we were serving with the most unbiased lens. And so important in, this perspective to drop the labels, to drop the power differential, and to really just meet the person human to human. All the spirit of MI is great, but if we don't couple that with change talk and with a change direction, then we're not really practicing motivational interviewing. So there's other practices that use OR skills. I tell my class, the motivational interviewing class, even if they don't go into micro practice, learning how to engage, learning how to ask powerful questions and truly listen are going to be skills that can serve you well in any level of practice. But when we think about MI, if we are not having conversations about change, then they're not truly in that spirit. So let's jump into why people change. And people change when they can say yes to these questions, when they can say, yes, now is the right time, when they can say, yes, it's important enough, and when they feel like there is the ability level to be able to have a skill base, have a knowledge base, to be able to turn the corner. Change is hard. If we think of something in our life, I imagine many of us are have changes right now we want to embrace, or we can think about a past change that we were focused on. And change is difficult, and change takes a lot of different steps. And that's why this theoretical framework can be really, really helpful. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about these processes because we are all familiar with these. But as you all know, MI is made up of 4 different processes, starting with engagement, ending with planning. We don't want to jump to planning too soon because that can cause a client to just really slam on the brakes and say, what are you asking me to do, before they're really ready. And that aligns really well with the information that we're covering today. Focusing is essential so that you know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, as that quote that quickly was on the PowerPoint, if you don't know where you're going, how do you get there? How do you make a roadmap to get there? And using MI with any client in any setting, we serve as that guide. So that roadmap becomes really important, because how are we going to point out the stops along the way? How are we going to be able to really highlight the path if we're not sure where that destination is? And that destination can change. We're not stuck in one destination. A conversation can start one way and then end another way, and that's okay, as long as we're checking in and using our MI skill sets to make sure that we're aligned. Evoking is this key part of MI, and so important to be able to pull out the change talk and to be able to really get at the root of what is going to help the individual to make this next step in the direction of their life that they choose. So things up here such as getting curious about what motivates them and helping to pull out what are the supports, what's the recovery capital, what are the things that are going to help support someone in being able to make a change. Keep going backwards, we want to go forward. And then planning is solidifying the change, involving the chance to really talk through how are you going to prevent steps backwards, how are you going to reinforce those changes through using the same or skill set, but also really exploring as you're evoking. So stages of change, I imagine this is something that many of you are familiar with. It's a concept that is taught in social work classes sometimes, but also psychology, sociology classes, and it's been around since the 1990s. So nothing new here about the stages of change. I do think that as you look at this, you can see how it has the cycle, but important to note that, it's not this linear, you're in pre-contemplation for this X period of time, and then you move to contemplation and you're there for 3 weeks, and then you're in preparation and you're there for 2 months. So there's no formula that really dictates how quickly someone wants to change. And we become part of that equation, but it's not an equation that is a solid math equation. It's not 2 + 2 = 4. Because someone can enter at one stage and then quickly move to a further stage, or someone can experience a relapse or a reoccurrence, even when they're in an action or a maintenance stage. And then when they get back into the change cycle, then they have that, depending on where they're at, where their mindset's at, then they might enter back into taking action again to address the issue that's of concern, or maybe they enter back in pre-contemplation and they've decided that the previous change target is no longer a problem that they want to work on. So I'll talk a little bit more about each change as we talk about the motivational strategies that you can use to align with that. But that's our framework. So MI is really the intervention, and then the stages of change provide this theoretical framework that can help us decide as practitioners, as social workers, what's the right step to address and partner with this individual. So the different kinds of change talk are probably old news to everyone, but I love the acronym. Darn cats think it's very, very helpful in remembering the different types of change talk. You'll see on this slide how that change talk corresponds with some of the different stages of change that were just mentioned. So darn change talk about the desire. So I want to do something different. I really want to, quit smoking. I hope to stop drinking. or ability. Maybe someone took action in the past, or maybe someone has had the ability they stopped smoking cigarettes and now they want to apply that to, a different prescription medication or alcohol use. So they've done something where they could apply a similar skill set. Reasons. A lot of times when we think about this in the context of someone using substances, the reasons are external. So someone got caught for a DUI, and so the court is saying you need to, do this or you're going to have your license suspended. Your supervisor at your work is saying, okay, if you don't go to treatment or if you don't receive services, then your job is in jeopardy. Or maybe a significant other says, I'm concerned about you, something has to change. And so sometimes those reasons are not, I just want a different life. Sometimes those reasons are, I need to make things different about my life, or. So it can be this if-then. If this doesn't change, then this is going to happen. And that's enough of a push to say, okay, I'm going to look at something a little bit different. Also need. So that can play right into reasons. The needs to change can also be avoiding, negative things happening, negative mental health, negative medical health, negative consequences with court, school, with work, etc. So that's our on the left side of this hill of ambivalence, right? Ambivalence. Should I do this or should I not? On the downside is our CAT change talk. So that's when individuals are taking more action. So in looking at this in the framework of the stages of change, we're going to hear more of that commitment, that activation language, and the taking steps when someone is in the preparation or the action, or obviously also the maintenance stage of change. So keep that in mind as we continue on. So starting off, pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation is when individuals have not yet said that they want to do anything different with their lives. So they're not yet aware that a change needs to happen, or they're not considering change, or sometimes maybe change seems too far in the distance. Like change seems something that is impossible or too difficult to do, that an individual is just not considering that that's even a possibility for their life. Sometimes individuals also don't see their behavior as problematic. So someone, in the example of the DUI, someone got caught drinking, but doesn't see that as a all the time behavior or as even a problematic behavior. So they know others are seeing it as an issue, but they're not personally seeing that as an issue. So what to do when someone's in this stage of change? Some of the strategies include really working hard on groundwork. So building rapport with individuals becomes essential. Building that trust. Individuals that come in, particularly if they're coming in to receive services because of external factors, may feel like they have to be there, or they're being forced to be there, may feel some of that pressure from being coerced. So letting individuals know that you are really interested in what they have to say, exploring the concerns from their point of view, not assuming that you have the whole story because you read part of a report. So really engaging with that individual to try to understand their perspective. Also eliciting concerns of what others in their life might consider problems. So if they came in because of a work situation or a significant other situation or a family situation, trying to pull out what is going on, what's your significant other worried about, or what is the court worried about, can give an additional picture. Other things that can happen would be to really, in this stage, can be to begin to understand what an individual already knows as far as information goes, because this can be a time when information building and consciousness raising can be really important. But as we know with MI, we never just want to give information. We always use that elicit, provide elicit, where we're asking individuals what they know, or asking permission to provide information. We don't want to get in the position where we're telling someone what they have to do or what they should do, because that's not a strategy that's typically going to be effective. I think a hand went up. Was that you, Carrie, that you had a hand? Somebody has a question. Feel free to jump in. No? Okay. So other strategies at this point would be to use affirmations. That's the A in our OR skills, and affirming individuals can definitely help, particularly when someone has the experience of feeling like they're forced into something, or when they're feeling really lost and not sure which direction to go. Other things that are important during this are to really think through what's the direction that we want to go. So maybe someone comes into treatment to work on a particular issue, but there's something else going on with them that they would much prefer to work on. So even though it's the DUI that got them through the door, they really want to work on, coping for anger, or want to work on a relationship with someone in their life. And so being able to really identify what's most important to the individual you're serving is a key part of this, just setting that groundwork, making sure that you're there for them, and being able to use the MI spirit. The last bullet on this screen talks about that personalized feedback on assessment finding. So sometimes early on in treatment, there's maybe an audit screener done, or some sort of other tool done that might give you an indication of someone's alcohol use or someone's substance use, or if you're using MI in another setting, someone's level of depression or suicidal ideations, cutting, all the different behaviors that could potentially be something that this may be utilized for. And so giving feedback, personalized feedback that's client-centered, that's directed towards the individual, can also be a strategy in this stage. They can start to inch someone towards, beginning to try to at least consider the possibility that change could be on the menu. And that's where the next stage takes us to, this contemplation stage. Contemplation stage is filled with ambivalence. So it's not, the change has not been resolved by any means. It's still early on. So in that hill, we're still early on in the stages. But within the contemplation stage, an individual has become aware that their behavior could potentially be cause for concern. And so they're on the fence. Should I keep doing this? Should I not? Should I quit this behavior and maybe not have these consequences over here with my family, or with my job? But then there's the current lifestyle that I'm leading, or my friends that I would have to give up, or maybe this has become the strategy that I use to wind down, or to manage my anxiety or depression or stress, or anything else that's going on. So somebody has to really go through that. When I worked as a direct counselor in my past treatment jobs, this is often the stage that I would see youth come in, and sometimes they were at other stages too, but I would say that this is the most common, and a lot of times it's where they stayed all through treatment. Actually, they would have moments where they'd get really like move up. But contemplation stage can be a tough one. It can be one where someone, stays a while, because there are sometimes advantages of the status quo, and really taking a look at what would my life look like in the future? What would things look like if this behavior continues? Can be ways to start to, sometimes push the needle a little bit towards considering the possibility of change. So in this, there's that simultaneous push and pull of, yes, it could be better, and this is also what is working right now. So when an individual is in this stage, meeting contemplation using MI strategies looks like normalizing and resolving ambivalence, letting individuals know that what you're going through is really, really common, that having these feelings of not being so sure is something that so many of us and so many individuals, go through on the process to change. So not a new road that's being carved out. Trying to take that focus from external to internal. So I mentioned sometimes in pre-contemplation, outside factors, court systems, family systems, work systems that are saying, hey, change, 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 and giving all that noise. And so in contemplation stage, trying to internalize, like, what is different about what someone internally wants with maybe their values. They value something in the long term that their current behavior, may not get them there, or they value something about relationships in their life that their current actions, are not moving their relationships towards that goal, or not actualizing that. So starting to really pull out that discrepancy can be a great way for individuals to engage in this stage. As we start to work with individuals on really wrestling with, should I change, should I not? Honoring that autonomy and making sure that we 100% let individuals we're working with know that they're in the driver's seat is very, very important. Because I don't know about you all, but the second that someone says, oh, you have to do this, then, again, those brakes can go up. And sometimes it's like that feels forced, and that feels like that's scary. So feeling like this is the decision that I want to make can be a much more comfortable spot. And as an MI practitioner, working with people on change, they're the experts on themselves. And so we're just trying to pull out the answers and the knowledge and skills that they already have internally. And so in contemplation, we get to do this. Sometimes we get to also explore past successes that they've had in other areas of their life, or maybe they felt more effective. Sometimes we're going to explore the pros and cons of behavior too. Using this strategy, you have to be really careful though, because you don't want to explore too much of the other side, because then sustained talk can rear its head. So we're looking for change talk in the favor of change, sustained talk being the other side of the coin there, where it's the reasons that someone doesn't want to change, someone fighting for the status quo. And as change becomes closer and closer to feeling real, sometimes that sustained talk will really amp up and try to be a really loud voice as that fights for, no, don't do it. And individuals have to really think about what's on both sides of that coin. When you're working with individuals and you start to hear that change talk, those darn cats, but particularly in contemplation, you're going to hear more of the darn side, the desire, ability, reasons, and need. As we know, we magnify that. We want to really highlight that change talk and say that out loud to the individual, because hearing those things back can be really, really powerful reinforcers of reasons, needs, desires to change for someone, and can help really put that spotlight on, okay, this is something that is important for me. It's something that's important for for my future, to meet the goals or to actualize the values that someone has for themselves. So the next stage is preparation. And so in preparation, it's kind of at the top of that hill, right? So someone has recognized, okay, there's something going on here. I want to do things about it. And maybe they've even started to take some small steps. Preparation is key, is because it is when that balance starts to tip in the favor of change, where you don't leave the status quo behind necessarily, because it's still right there in the review mirror for someone in this stage. It's it's still right there and present, because sustained talk might still come up, but you're going to hear much less sustained talk as someone starts to move into the, what's this going to look like for me if I do this? And potentially as more and more of that happens, as you hear more and more change talk and less sustained talk, as an MI practitioner, you get to move into the process of planning too. In preparation, you're still doing a lot of evoking as far as the MI skill set though. You're evoking the reasons that someone wants to change. You're evoking all of those things as someone really is faced with, what's this going to look like if I start to take those steps? What's this going to look like to really get ready? And so before, when we were looking at preparation and we were looking at pre-contemplation and contemplation, a lot of times someone's wrestling with, is this important? And some of you might be familiar with that, the different rulers, the readiness rulers, where we might even pull out questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is making this change? How important is stopping drinking to you? And someone might, respond to that. And then we can go, they said a 6, and you go down. And why a 6 and not a 4 or a 5? And then that way we're going to hear, how did they get there? What solidified them in that number? Rather than asking, why aren't you a higher number? Because sometimes then that's going to pull up more of this sustained talk and the reasons that the person doesn't want to change. In preparation stage, someone has many times resolved that importance. They know it's important, but it's the competence piece that they're looking at. So getting ready, feeling like they have the ability. And ability is so important because we can think something is really, really important to do, but not feel like we have the skill set to make things different. And that can be a place where we can see individuals get stuck, and where the counselor focus can really be important to really start to fill in the blanks. And what is that change plan going to look like? Well, how will your goals be actualized? Strategies such as thinking through what might get in the way, eliciting skill sets that someone has so that they can see those things as not just affirmations, but as strategies for success in being able to move towards the change that's important in their life. So preparation is that time where someone, if we think about the commitment, activation, and taking steps, someone might be taking steps, but maybe they're baby steps at this point in this stage of change. They're calling to make appointments. They're trying to explore finding a sponsor. They had started to attend group or know where the group is going to be, and they plan to attend next week. So you start to begin to hear some of that, not just I need to do this language, but like, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'm thinking through how this is going to happen. Thinking about this future version of someone's self where they can actualize these goals. And then comes action, and action is still right there with the mobilizing change talk. People are in this stage, really putting one foot in front of the other. They're taking steps forward into the direction of their change. And so we've worked in preparation to identify goals, to have a strategy, maybe even brainstorm some of the things that might come up, that might be hurdles. And in here, that continues where individuals are actively engaged in, maintaining their sobriety or changing their behaviors that are related to substance use. They might still face challenging situations, though. So our focus in counseling at this stage, when we use the framework of this for substance use interventions, is to support the action steps and then continually evaluate the change plans. Because things go wrong, things that we didn't expect come up, hurdles that we didn't expect, emotions that we didn't expect sometimes. And so our support is identifying with clients what's working, what's not working, how can we do more of what is working, and then reconfigure and regroup to really adjust things that are not as effective for the individual. When I was working in practice, sometimes this was like relapse prevention groups, or even work that was happening when there was a period of time where I worked where youth were in really long-term care. So they would be, with us for several months. And I don't know if we ever really got to action stage, but we definitely laid the framework for how are we going to do these things. And then youth would go on passes, like long weekend passes. And when they would come back, then we would talk through this. What worked? What didn't work? How can we regroup and really identify strategies that can continue to really affirm your success, but also take a different direction when what you plan to do is not effective. So maintenance is basically just action extended. So this is efforts that have continued for 6 months or more. So in this context of thinking about this with substance use disorders, someone's been able to maintain their change target for 6 months or more. Sometimes someone's change target is not just complete abstinence. So this could also look like maintenance on, maybe they were using a specific prescription drug, but maybe they haven't made the decision to be abstinent from all substances yet, or maybe it's not using anything because that was their choice. So sometimes you can be in different stages for different change targets at the same time, if that makes sense. Not to get it too confusing, but I think that that's important to note sometimes when you're working with individuals that have multiple different things going on, and clarifying and having that strong focus is an important piece of the puzzle then when that is happening. So with maintenance, it's all about exploring what this new lifestyle looks like and how are you going to start to build in things that are going to help to maintain this lifestyle in the long term. So thinking about this in the context of substance recovery, a lot of times that looks like fun and relationship and work type behavior. So how are you going to build in fun and strategies that's different, that maybe ways that you were spending your time in the past? How are relationships going to look different? Because if substances were a big part of your relationship or even your sexual relationship, then changing that and making that look different and carving out kind of new pathways become important pieces of that recovery. And just how day to day, if there's old patterns that are going to be triggers for someone to have a relapse or a reoccurrence, talking through those things also becomes important. So you'll see a lot of those things listed here. You're looking to stabilize and to identify how to support the change, and really being able to know who are the individual's recovery capital. And sometimes those are people or maybe places, maybe it's different cultural factors, maybe it's spiritual or religious factors, maybe it's just certain people that are really strong supports for an individual. Sometimes the recovery capital can also be internal. What knowledge and skills have been developed that can help someone to maintain the success that they've found in these new behaviors. And what's going to reinforce these new behaviors to be this motivation, because that willingness to continue to engage in these new behaviors, finding new reinforcers to really solidify that, become an important part of all of this. So a final slide that I want to talk through is this relapse strategies. And so relapse and reoccurrence, doesn't necessarily mean that that's always going to happen, but it's part of the change cycle. And important from our social work perspective is to really remember that a relapse or a reoccurrence that doesn't equal failure. That doesn't equal that someone is still not going to be motivated to change. It just can be another step in the stage. And so if that occurs with someone that you're evaluating, working with, someone that you're associated with, this right focus is to help an individual re-enter the change cycle as soon as possible. And that's re-entering at the stage that they are currently at. So, maybe if you're using MI with an individual that just had a relapse, maybe you've gone back to where they're still on that fence and they're considering, is this something that I want to really change or not? So you start there. Or maybe an individual says, I realize what happened. I realize what really led to this decision-making process, and I'm ready to re-engage. And so they're right back into action stage. So as with so much in motivational interviewing with this, the client is the lead. They get to really be in that driver's seat, and you're along to be the guide and the co-pilot and to help support the changes that the individual wants to make. So in this context of this presentation, we get to, in this stage, if this occurs, provide additional support to identify other coping skills that could be utilized, and to discuss, what worked and what didn't, kind of going back to some of those previous stages. And with that, always doing that in this spirit of MI that is evoking hope in the change in the future, and really reinforcing that there are options so that an individual can begin to envision that. So that's the end of the slides. I know it's a quick tutorial of stages of change in MI, but I'm curious if anyone has examples from their own practice, their own practicum that they want to throw out, and that we could talk through what appropriate strategies might be. in those cases. Jeopardy music. Who uses MI in current practice? See a few hands. Yeah, great. So for those that do use MI, if you're not familiar with the tip 35, I highly suggest that that you look into that. Joa, go ahead. Did you raise your hand?
Sorry, I just raised my hand
Yeah.
to say that I do use some form or aspect of MI in my direct practice or when I engage with clients, but yes.
Wonderful, thanks for sharing that. And the slides, yes, the slides will be shared. And let me drop a link. Let me drop the link to the tip 35, just if anyone wants to request it. If you came in late, I shared that you can even get this from the SAMHSA store. So it's a free book if you'd like to add that to your bookshelf collection.
Yeah, I actually did that, Jennifer, right after you said it. And it's easy to download it, obviously, but it's just so easy to order, and you don't really have to create an account on the website or anything. You can just guest checkout. So
yes, and yeah, you can download it, easy to do.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Could I make a comment?
Please.
I would like your discussion about relapse. And I think that even the word, when we use it, has such a negative impact on people. And we talk about these, nice stages, and then we said relapse. And so I like to think of it as helping clients manage ambivalence again, helping clients explore, and maybe even not manage, because that sounds like something you got to twist and turn on, helping them explore ambivalence again and reassure themselves of all the decisions they've made about moving forward to change, helping them re-examine them and see, where they want to go from there. But and I'm not suggesting because you use relapse that that's a problem. I'm just saying that that's the challenge of relapse, that it's a defeatist kind of experience, and framing it as re-examining ambivalence from an MI perspective helps us think about it differently, and also likely helps our clients think about it differently, hopefully in a more positive direction.
Yes, thanks for saying that. I think that's so important. And yeah, it is, we are kind of those holders of hope, because relapse can feel very defeatist. They can feel very hopeless for someone. So reframing that to this just reemergence of ambivalence, I think, is a really nice way to keep ourselves intentional and to keep ourselves from really letting bias or other thoughts that we might have about someone really creep in and take the seat, versus the MI spirit, which I very much equate with also what should be the social work spirit. Great. Looks like a few of you put in your in here different ways that you've used MI, which is great. Yeah, Mackie, I agree that it can help people feel understood and empowered. And then, what would you recommend when presented with a client in long-term sobriety relapsing twice and being dishonest with therapist? Would it be appropriate to reassign client to another therapist? So there's a lot of good questions in there. And I think that those kinds of questions are ones that it's always really helpful to have people on your team that can help you think through, is this still a client that I can work with? Is this still a client that I feel like I can give my best effort to? As social workers too, I think it's important that we don't see a lapse or reoccurrence as our own failure too. And that that the focus not be on the honesty of the behavior and like it being a hurt to us. I know that can be really, really hard sometimes. But when some people have all different sorts of reasons for maybe not sharing a full story. And so instead of that being something where we take it as they didn't give me the full story, just know that people have reasons and motivations for their behavior. And our job is to, if we want to assist them in this change cycle, to help unlock potential motivations for other behaviors that might get them to meet other ends in their own lives. So I think that to like the first component of that question, Brianna, is to not take it personally if there's differences that are happening or if you're not getting the full version, and then also use your team to decide if that's something that you're still the most appropriate, or if another person's perspective or another person's style or just another person to talk about things with at a fresh start is a better fit. That I guess I want to also say about tools and skills to maintain sobriety. So I think of this sometimes as just we learn things sometimes when we want to learn them at that time, right? So we can have all the tools and we can even have the skill set, but if there's not that motivation there to then really feel like we want to invest our time and our efforts into doing something, that we might not put it all together. And so being those like holders of hope in this space with clients, sometimes if tools and skills have been learned in the past, they're still there. There's still these seeds that have been planted, and we can build upon those and put them together in new ways, very much so in the same way that we learn behaviors that now we use every day. It's like reading and all walking. Those things don't just happen like overnight. We take small steps and then we're able to put those things together, and then those things eventually, for many of us, become things that become parts of day-to-day life. But most of us have behaviors that we do on a daily basis that now seem like, oh, I've been doing this forever. But if we really were able to, take a magnifying glass at what it looked like when we first started to do those things, the learning curve can be pretty steep sometimes. And we can have a short-term memory for what it feels like to start to put those things in action. Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed getting to talk about this with you all. Happy to stay on and talk for a few more minutes, but I do know in 10 minutes we have another presentation, and that presentation is going to be about prevention and practice. So going upstream a little bit, talking about substance use prevention. Yes, that's said really well. The client has the pathways. Yeah, so the pathways are there, so we can strengthen them. I feel like there's some of that hope language and packed into that response. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Come back in 10 minutes. Go take a water break.
It's good to see you, Jen. Thanks so much.
Good to see you.
Really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
I'm going to steal some of your slides, actually. That's kind of where I'm at. So
go for it.
Well, you got to send me that presentation first.
I can do that. No problem.
Thanks.
Dr. Wells, so good to see you.
Oh my, it's good to see you too. I miss you guys. I just literally glowed of course I already knew you were on, but when Nick came on, I know I glowed because it's just so fun to see him.
Well, you're always invited, to come pop into anything we're doing. So
well, I appreciate it. I don't like to appear to be, a ghost hanging around.
No.
But, like I told you, it literally was true. It's just so fascinating to hear other people talk about MI. And I learned that early on about it. I'd been through the first big intro and advanced. And there was one at the State Child Abuse Conference, and Thad Leffingwell was doing it. And I thought, well, I don't have anything to do that day and I need the hours, so I guess I'll go. But